Okay, so we'll get started by sitting in whatever comfortable position. You can sit in Virasana, you can sit in a simple cross-legged position. We're going to be using blankets and potentially a bolster, potentially a chair, and a belt. So if you need that stuff, you can go ahead and take it. I'm just sitting in Virasana, and I showed last week how to use the larger belt around the knees for seated swastikasana, sukhasana. So I'll show that when we get to the seated part, but just as an FYI, or just maybe as a recap, Virasana, so if I sit on my heels, that's Vajrasana. I haven't really been taught pranayama and Vajrasana in the Iyengar method. It's a thing, I guess it could potentially be done. Vajrasana is easier than Virasana. Virasana is where you actually take your feet on the outside. Now, for sure, you would sit on some height. You know, for most people, this would be too much strain. So this is more superior. This is superior to simple cross-leg position because of the weight it puts on the thighs. When the thighs are weighted down like this, the chest gets a lift up versus, say, simple cross legs. So not to say that we don't do simple cross legs, it's just because of the pressure on the thighs. And then the story is that Iyengar himself would teach pranayama in Padmasana, which is this pose, which you can see for sure there's a lot of weight on the thighs pressing down because it lifts the chest up. So that's just something for you to explore in your own practice. Just, you know, if you can do Padmasana, if you can do Virasana, if you can do simple cross legs, or maybe one of those poses bothers you, then you don't do it. So explore the posture in the asana practice and just pick a seat that works for you. And if all else fails or you're fatigued, then just sit in a chair, because the purpose is to create an environment where the breath will come easily. And if you're struggling in an uncomfortable seat, then it will take away from that. Okay, so we'll get started. And you'll sit tall, draw the back ribs in, maybe take your hands behind you if you're sitting on some height, or maybe have if your arms are long enough, have the fingertips down onto the floor or onto some blankets or a bolster or whatever you have, blocks available to you, and just sit tall and draw the back ribs in for a few moments. So this kind of aerates the sides of the lungs, the lateral portion of the lungs, and then lift from the bottom of the sternum bone up, head and neck in line with the shoulders, eyes quiet. Then maintain that lift on your chest and draw your palms together, and then close your eyes and go inside. Take a few deep and purposeful inhalations and exhalations, soften, and go inside. Observe the breath. So last week I talked about observing the breath, not with a thinking mind, but with the feeling, with the emotion. And so sometimes when we observe with the feeling or the emotion, we're not putting like a specific label or a word onto that breath. It's more, it could be a color, a texture, a sound. So that internalized sound of your own breath, that's not, you know, meant to be audible to the external environment. It's something that you can connect, attach your awareness to help you with a concentration. So Iyengar says that concentration has kind of a multifaceted viewpoint, so that, you know, you're kind of multitasking, managing a number of different things. And you could think of that as being in an asana where, you know, you've got the front leg extended, back leg extended, the rotation of the skin is going one way in one area, one in the other. Then you add the arms and the spine. So that's kind of concentration on a multifaceted level. But meditation is single pointedness. Eka is one. So kind of like that Eka Granta, that single pointed focus. So we'll chant Om together 3 times and then repeat the invocation in call and response. Take a deep exhalation and then slowly inhale and start. Om. Please repeat after me. Yogena chittasya padena vacham. Yogena chittasya padena vacham. Malam sharirasya javajjakena. Malam sharirasya javajjakena. Yopagarotam savaram muninam. Yopagarotam savaram muninam. Patanjalim pranjarira natosmi. Patanjalim pranjarira natosmi. Abahu prushakaram. Abahu prushakaram. Shankachakrasitarinam. Shankachakrasitarinam. Sahasra shirasam shvetam. Sahasra shirasam shvetam. Pranamami Patanjalim. Pranamami Patanjalim. Hare Om. Lift your chest, bow your head, surrender your head to your heart, salute the light within, and slowly lower your hands, raise your head, and slowly open your eyes. We'll make our way to Shavasana. You may want to have something to cover yourself up with, wear socks. You can turn your lights off. If you want something soft to cover your eyes, take that. So we're going to go with the 3 folded blankets again, just to do this another time so we get a little bit familiar with kind of the classical way we set up for Shavasana. So that's going to be 3 folded blankets or towels. And if you don't have all the stuff, then just use a bolster so that you're not running around the house trying to find linens. Just use a bolster. Bolster is fine. It's just a little thick for most people's spine because the spinal area is more narrow. And then there's different ways that we can make these setups. Actually, sorry, I lied. I was doing the setup for next week. It's 2 3-folded blankets, and then the third one is a pillow for your head. So make, usually this 4-folded blanket works well, and we use then the soft edge of that folded blanket. Now, if you have any issues lying down, you know, with your buttocks flat on the floor and this little bit of a riser, I'm going to show you a couple ways that you can work with additional props. So I've just got a bolster here. When I sit in front of, so I've got this as a stair step position. So hopefully you can see that I have the mat, then the first stair, then the second stair. So it's going to be sacrum, and then sacrum kind of comes onto this first blanket, then the bottom of my rib cage. And so option is, if your lower back bothers you when you lie down, you take this bolster, but it's not under the knees. It's actually hiked up under the hamstrings, as much like where the glute is, as much as possible. So that's for lower back. And then don't be in a hurry to straighten your legs. Just keep the legs bent to help the tailbone, pelvis, everything release. So if I was to then straighten my legs, it would look like this, and I might then move this bolster up even higher as much as I could. Then the second variation, if you feel like you're a little bit still hyper from the day, like mobile, moving around, and you want to just kind of weigh yourself down, go again with bent legs, then you take the bolster over your thighs. That will kind of keep the mind from being really, really busy and active. So just let yourself go, extend the arms to the sides, take your time, don't be in a hurry. You know, if you're still grabbing things to get settled, do that. Feel free to do all of that. You're going to have a nice long Shavasana tonight to start with. And this is typically the way that Gita and Prashant would teach pranayama at the Institute. Maybe a little bit different than how it's done in a regular class. Just like the asanas, there's so many different ways of interpreting this stuff. So it doesn't mean that that was right or wrong. It just is different. So I'm just, with this 4-week series, trying to give a sample of kind of classically how the Iyengars taught their pranayama. And so typically pranayama would be done separate from your asana practice. There would be a demarcation between the two. Sometimes it's blended now a little bit, I see, and that's okay. It's just, ideally, I think you have a separate time for pranayama in the morning or in the evening, typically, is when it would be done. So let yourself get settled there. I just have a few readings that I wanted to share with you tonight. If you put something over your eyes, just make sure there's no pressure on the nose itself. Let your arms go, let your legs go, completely relax. As you spread yourself out on the surface of your mat, just see that the heels aren't shrinking and extend through the inner heels. In pranayama, we tend to take the limbs a little closer to each other, especially if we are, you know, not in a super warm climate, so that the arms stay close to the sides of the hips versus a vertical out to the sides, or horizontal rather, out to the sides. And that is to quiet the brain down. When the arms start to go higher and higher up, the brain tends to stay active. Let the tailbone release down towards the feet. Feel the thoracic area, the T9, T8. The thoracic area should feel open and lift towards the head side. Relax, let go, let loose. Keep the arms relaxed. Roll the thumbs down. So the bicep, the inner upper arm rolls down. Focus on the limbs for the first little while. Arms, legs, release them, make them heavy. And let them recede to the element of earth. Concentrating on the limbs will help to make them still. The limbs are the karmendriyas, the organs of action, and they're prone to movement. And we have also, I've mentioned before, all the nerves on the hands and the feet tend to keep those areas wanting to be mobile and to move. So there's a bit of a discipline to maintaining stillness in these organs of action. But when we get that stillness, it draws a deeper energy into the nervous system. Observe your breath not with the brain itself, but with feeling, sense, and a deeper intelligence. And I just want to share this message from senior Iyengar yoga teacher Peter Scott on pranayama. The fourth limb, pranayama, is the extension, expansion, prolongation, requisition, and distribution of vital energy and consciousness to spread well in its field, the body and mind. It is said that when breath is, there is consciousness. So correct pranayamic practices regulate habits, desires, and actions, and act as a bridge in unifying the body, the mind, and the self. So that was Iyengar's quote. And then Peter writes, when we take the time to move intentionally through life, both with our minds and bodies, we can reach a more balanced and content sense of self. Each time you engage with your yoga practice, coming back to your breath and taking a moment to yourself, you're giving yourself the space to live in the moment fully. Balance shouldn't have to be a luxury. It should be something each of us can enjoy every day. So I like that statement. When you take the time to move intentionally through life, both with our minds and bodies, we can reach a more balanced and content sense of self. And so we can start to really feel that balance in our breathing. Particularly when we observe with the feeling part of ourselves rather than the thinking part. So by now, if you feel steady and quiet, observe the pause at the very end of the exhalation and the pause at the very end of the inhalation. So there'll be a natural pause that will occur as the muscles switch over between inhaling and exhaling. So just observe that. And then if you're practicing that to your own capacity, you'll see now that the breath has been parsed into 4 separate parts: the inhale, the pause, the exhale, the pause. So there is a prolongation already happening. And just observe the balance of those 4 parses of the breath, 4 partitions. And then work to refine the breath, make it smooth. Observe that the breath is not rushed. One way to slow the breath down on the inhalation, particularly, is to see that you're actually moving the skin of the sides of the nose down towards the tip of the nose as you inhale. And it sounds a little strange, perhaps, but Iyengar in Light on Pranayama often talks about the movement of the skin and takes quite a bit of time and attention to the detail of the movement of the skin. You know, particularly the skin on the face and the skin of the navel region and the respiratory areas as they rise and fall. But particularly the nose, he said, is like a very complex instrument. And we're going to work with the nose a little bit in our practice today. So try to sensitize yourself to this concept that as you inhale, the skin on the nose moves down towards the tip of the nose without it becoming too labored. If it feels easy, then go for it. And if it feels very obscure and hard to find, then maybe try for a few breaths and then let it go and come back to it. The idea is to refine the breath and make it longer. There's a few types of breath, and this is like an aloma breath, which means along the grain, so with the grain. And often Prashant Iyengar refers to it as like a long, glossy, lustrous strand of hair. Allow the rhythm of your breathing to create its own length. Focus on the exhalation now. And see if when you're focusing on the exhalation, when you do inhale, you can maintain that action of the skin of the nose going down towards the tip of the nose. Allow your exhalation to quietly release. Almost in a very tender way. You're going for that very smooth, refined exhalation. Observe the size of the navel as it draws in or back as you inhale, and see that that's a respiratory action, not a muscular action. Now on the inhalation, see if you can focus on the movement of the floating ribs in the diaphragm of the chest. As you inhale, feel these ribs lift upwardly and out to the sides. And then allow the breath, if you can, based on your own capacity, to move towards the armpits and the upper ribs, and then up towards the clavicle bone. But of course, you don't want to force this. This is just based on capacity. The breath should be deep, long, smooth, quiet, refined. On the inhalation, then experience that natural pause. It should just occur on its own now without really effort. And a deep, long, smooth, silky, tender exhalation and a pause. Again, not being done mentally. Be honest with yourself and observe any stress or tension that arises. Take some easy breaths. Just stop the kind of pranayamic actions and just focus on easy breaths. We call them recovery breaths or normal breaths, regular breaths. And then very slowly, taking your time here, start to draw your breath and your awareness back into the room. Very slowly, one at a time, bend your arms, place your arms on your trunk, and bend your legs and carefully turn to the side. Come up really slowly, especially after a long shavasana. You want to give your nervous system some time to adjust and also to maintain the quietness. My first teacher often mentioned this, especially after shavasana, to maintain that quietness for as long as you can, even after the practice. Okay, so I'm just going to turn the light up a little bit, and you're going to set up for seated. So it'll be the seated variation of your choice. I'm just going to show with the belt, the large belt for simple cross legs position. And, you know, for ease, we can take a bolster, if that's enough height for you, and just sit on the bolster. There should be some height to lift the spine up. So I've got this big strap, a long strap. It could be 2 straps together to make a big loop. And this is, I find, really nice if you tire after sitting in a simple cross-legged position for a while, or if the spine is tired or fatigued. Now, last week I showed with the stacked blocks. I'm not gonna set that up now, but I'm just going to just show you. We had a number of blocks, and I'm short, so 3 works for me. But if you're taller, you almost need, my floor is very uneven, you almost need 4. So I think the other thing I was thinking is you could actually sit in a door frame with your back against that narrow part of the door frame, obviously the side where the door is not. And you could put your spine against that if you wanted to try sitting somewhere else at home. So just to show you this simple cross legs, if you want to use the blocks, you can go ahead and do that. And you can also use the belt at the same time. So I'm just going to take my legs into a simple cross leg position. Then I take the strap over one knee. It comes behind me. So it's just the doubled up strap, and then hooks over the other knee. And then I just tighten it up. So it stays and it comes onto the sacrum, and I just tighten it up. And it feels like a little bit like a sling, where I can hold my pelvic contents, everything, the pelvis, pubic bone, and the tailbone in without, you know, struggling. And it actually is really nice on a spine. You could also sit with your back against the wall. So I just find I can stay for a longer period of time here. And then I'll just show you. So it's just around the sacrum, lower down than the waist, and it's just over the 2 knees. If I show a front view here, it's not really like, it's not down the leg, it's just over the 2 knees, like so. So that's an option if that's going to help you sit for a longer period of time. And then before I turn the lights down a little bit low again, just that idea of moving the skin of the nose down towards the tip of the nose. You could just take your hands and just, sometimes it helps to just inform the skin so we're not confusing it. If just take your hands and just take it from where that bony part is down towards the tip of the nose, and do that. And then as you're pulling the skin down, slowly take a deep inhalation. And so it feels like the breath is moving in this way, and then the skin is moving. And what it does is it elongates the breath. So it's like using the nose as an instrument to refine your pranayama. So the other is Jalandhara Bandha. So Jalandhara Bandha is defined as chin lock, but really it's chest lift and then chin lock. So see that you lift the chest before you take the chin down. And I teach sometimes, just in case that feels odd for you, because it's a hard position to hold now, because a lot of us, our neck is getting flat. So I teach this a lot with this roller. This could be just a pair of socks, you know, as long as it's not like very thick woolen socks. It could be a rolled washcloth or a hand towel or something. And what it does is it just holds this bottom part of my chin in position. And this is just an Indian, we call it a head wrap or an Indian bandage that we use a lot in therapeutic classes, but it really, you can see where you're going with this Jalandhara Bandha here. And the purpose for that is if we don't do that Jalandhara Bandha, when we inhale, we tend to do this. And then we're in our head, right? So it's like putting the lid on the jar when we do this action. So we just wanted to spend a little bit of time on the importance of that. So getting set up there, then I'll just turn the lights down a little bit lower here. And then focus on the physical pose, just the seated pose. Make yourself comfortable and see that you're comfortable enough that you can come back to that quiet state you had when you were sitting, or sorry, when you were lying in Shavasana. And then taking the hands on the knees, a slight bend in the elbow. The upper arm should be ideally a little bit behind the side wall of the chest. So for some people, if it's proportional, having a rolled or a three-folded blanket on top of their thighs is helpful because it helps to get that upper arm behind the chest rather than here the chest will collapse when my upper arms are forward. So I want to slide them back and sit tall. Palms can be facing up or down. Some people like to do a mudra. Jhana mudra is a popular one with the index finger and the thumb. That's fine if that feels good for you. And then try that Jalandhara Bandha. So see that you lift the chest up before you drop the head down. And then just know that the tendency is as we inhale, we lift the head up. And as we exhale, we drop the chest. So just observe those two tendencies by taking a few deep ujjayi breaths here. And the observation again comes from the feeling, the emotion, rather than the mind, the logic. So the skin on the nose stays down as you slowly inhale. And there's a precision to the movement. You'll feel again the floating ribs open. From the center out to the side. Try to have a kind of smooth movement. You're looking for a rhythm, your own flow. And anytime you need to, adjust your seated posture, your Jalandhara Bandha, your anything, do that when you're taking some normal or recovery breath. And then when it feels accessible to you, when the rhythm is there, when the flow is there, come to that very top of the inhalation and experience the pause. And then the very bottom of the exhalation and experience the pause that naturally occurs. So you're starting in this seated posture now to parse the breath into 4 parts. But don't be in a hurry. Sometimes it's just enough to sit and observe the breath. So these pauses are important and an important step in the progress of pranayama. They work towards the kumbhaka or the holding that occurs a little bit later on. But they are literally just a pause. And now at the end of the inhale, during the pause, lightly lift the top of the breastbone towards the skin. So lifting the center of the sternum towards the skin. And then try to maintain this as you exhale. It will descend, but it shouldn't feel like it's dropping down. So I'll go through that again. As you inhale, and then you come to the very top of that inhalation, move the sternum bone towards the skin, and then try to maintain that as you exhale. And then find that there's no tension, there's no stress. So after doing that, there's a little bit of muscular activity involved there. So maybe you need to take some recovery breaths. Perhaps notice if the head has started to lift up when you've added that feature of the lift of the skin and the sternum region. And then next, as you inhale, rather than going straight up and down the spine in a vertical way, feel like you're inhaling along the sides of the trunk, the torso. This will bring less pressure into the thoracic area and feel more expansive. Lifting that breath up towards the sides of the chest. Once you have that lift in the side walls of the chest, try to maintain that as you exhale, and then feel the abdominal wall move backwards. It's not a muscular tightening, and there should feel like there's no downward pressure. It's a backwards movement, the sides of the navel. And then at the very bottom of the exhale, see if you can just lightly hold the sides of the navel towards the lumbar spine as the chest remains lifted. And then maybe do a few more cycles or take a few recovery breaths in between. So every day with an asana is different. What's that saying? Every day is a new downward dog. Every day with pranayama is very different. We could be tired, maybe didn't sleep well, long day, mind is occupied with something, the vrittis are there. We could feel rajasic, tamasic. And so you don't want to force this with the willpower. In Light on Life, BKS Iyengar talks about an echo breath, which is like a deepening of the exhalation, a prolonging of the exhalation. It's like in the Sanskrit language, when there's a dot after underneath the last letter of a word, it's usually an H, it can be an M or an N or some other. It's like an echo sound, so it has an aha sound to it. Yoga ha is the H, so it's a similar echo sound with this exhalation. And then we get to where Prashant talks about that longer, deeper, evacuatory type of breath. And you can also have that deepening of the inhalation as you take a long, deep inhalation. You come to the very top of the inhale, you can almost take another sip of that breath and just top it up before you exhale. Similarly, with the exhalation, you can go to the very bottom of the exhale, and then maybe you feel like you have just a little bit more left to exhale, but without force, you can't do it. Then you can take just a little sip of air, like just a small inhale, literally just a little sip, and see if you can then release more and more on that exhalation. So there's a rhythm to it. I talked last week about Gita mentioning what is the breath that nourishes you. And sometimes we can experience that here if we need to take that little sip at the very bottom of the exhale. Maybe that's the breath we need to work towards. You've been sitting for a while, so just observe the spine. It should remain well lifted. Head down in Jalandhara Bandha. And now I'm just going to have you do another change of breath. So take a few recovery breaths here. You're going to work on Antara Kumbhaka if the pause after the inhalation felt like it was coming. So, or you can just stay in the pause. So Antara Kumbhaka is an internal retention of the breath. And so if you need to change the crossing of the legs, you can do it. If you have the belt on, you can simply just recross. If you need to adjust your sitting position at all, do it. If you don't, then that's fine. You can stay. If you're comfortable, you can stay. But in this case, I'm going to take my hands on my knees and pull the femur bones in a little bit towards the hip. I'm going to move this blanket so you can see better. I'm going to pull these femur bones in more towards the hip, because as I go for Antara Kumbhaka, as I exhale, then I inhale, I'm going to hold now. So it will feel like it's a bit more muscular where I'm bringing these femur bones in, moving the abdomen in, and then I keep the chest lifted as I exhale. Drawing the sides of the navel back. So instead of releasing the trunk down. So some people like to count. There's all different ways of doing this, but really what we're doing here is just a prolonged pause, because we've worked on the pause. If the pause was coming, then you'll go for the Antara Kumbhaka. Kumbhaka is a seal. So it's more of an internalized holding of the breath. And so we'll go for a few rounds of that. Or you just stay with the pause. If that felt like it was work enough, then you can just stay with the pause. So start with a deep exhalation. Release the temples down, forehead, skin. Find that you have that Jalandhara Bandha action. Lift up from the back of the breastbone. Keep that lifted. With the hands on the knees, pull them towards you. And if you have any abdominal issues, then don't do this. It's too strong for that right now. Stay with the pause. Feel the strong connection now down to the floor of the pelvis. And then take a few deep inhalations here in cycles and come to the very top of the inhale and hold the breath in Antara Kumbhaka. And this works on the mobility of the diaphragm. The diaphragm is very mobile. You can feel it move inside you as you breathe. And so it means it's moldable, much like the hands and the feet. With all the fine bones, they're moldable, malleable, manipulatable. The diaphragm of the chest, you know, for some of us, when we start these practices, feels so tight and constricted. The diaphragm of the chest is moldable. It actually, you can move it so you can mold it. And so these practices of internal retention will help to mold the diaphragm, give it more, because you're inhaling up and it spreads out. So it's increasing its range of motion. So just a few more breaths, or just stay with a pause, or just observe your breath. Okay, and then I'm just going to introduce one more seated pranayam if you still have it in you. If you need to switch position, you want to sit in a chair, it's fine. If you want to get up for Shavasana, if you've had enough, that's fine as well. I'm just going to come closer to the screen to show digital pranayam. So typically we use our right hand, but you know, Gita always throws things into the mix, and she started teaching with the left hand. I'm left-handed, and my teacher told me not to use my left hand when I was in India. But then Gita said, use your dominant hand, and then I was like, okay. So what you're gonna do is roll your index finger and your middle finger into the center of your hand, and you'll see in my case, the ring finger really curls up with it. This is the symbol of ahimsa, nonviolence in the body, because it can't really move on its own. So this mudra is the one of nonviolence. That's just an aside. So sometimes it's nice just to kind of help your fingers find their way. So I curl the middle finger and the index finger in. And then Iyengar said the surface of the thumb is rougher than the surface of the ring finger and the little finger, because we do more with the thumb. The skin there is tougher. So he said it's a good idea to rub the middle finger, the ring finger and the little finger and the thumb together to sensitize the thumb. So if you read the PDF of Light on Yoga, he goes into great detail if there's any confusion. And I just want to show, just for the record here, there is a way I think some yogas teach this. I only really teach this if my student has severe arthritis, because it creates a kind of rigidity in the nose, meaning the arthritis would preclude them from being able to fold their fingers in this way. So take some time to learn that, because he likens it to playing an instrument, which is the nostrils here. So this touch is much softer with these fingers out of the way, and they're not touching. Again, the PDF has really clear pictures, the PDF of Light on pranayama has really clear pictures of his hand position. If there's any confusion. So I'm using my right hand. My right thumb is on the right side of the nose, and then the ring and little finger are on the left. And then I find this bony area, then the cartilage, and I just slide the fingers down. So we're going to do Analoma 1B. It sounds very technical. That's why it's important to learn pranayama from a teacher. Otherwise, if you pick up the book, which is a great book, it can be quite technical. And pranayama has its own language. So you take the hand down. In an Analoma 1B, we're going to inhale through both nostrils. And then in this case, I'll close the left and then exhale through the right. Then typically while we're learning this, and some of you have been doing this before, you release your hand down, then you inhale through both nostrils. Then you take your hand to your nose. Now you exhale through the left, meaning you plug the right. Then you remove the hand down. Then you inhale and you go back and forth. If it's new to you, if you've done it before and you can do successions, I'll leave that up to you. I just wanted to put that out there. And then over time, you can use both hands. Gita said, if we only always use one hand and we do it a lot, it'll be an imbalance in the shoulders. So she always had all the details covered. So I'm just going to turn the lights down again. We'll just do a few rounds of this before you lie down for Shavasana. I wanted to introduce it today so that we can get into it in some more detail next week. So please try and practice it once. It can be done on its own. And this is a really, analoma means with the hair, with the grain. It's a nice introduction to digital pranayama. I'll just use my left hand because it's closest to the screen now. So you'll sit, lift the chest, take the head down in Jalandhara Bandha. And typically what we do is if we're going to do the hand up and down position, then we hold the hand on the knee. And then I would take a deep exhalation, inhale through both nostrils, bring my hand up to my nose, slide down, plug the left nostril, and exhale through the right. Remove my hand, inhale through both, bring my hand up, plug the right nostril, exhale through the left. Remove my hand, inhale through both, or take successive cycles of what feels good for you. So I'll just give you a moment here to explore this. The arm itself, the upper arm, isn't squeezing the side walls of the chest. There's space there. That armpit is well lifted. So you're inhaling through both nostrils and you're exhaling through alternative nostrils. Right, then left, then right, then left. And notice how this complements what you just did, which was Antara Kumbhaka, because there is a hold of the breath after the inhale as you bring your fingers into position to get ready to exhale. So it's like a complementary form of the practice. I'm just going to let you go for a few more rounds at your own pace. Keep the rhythm. You can use both hands if you're wanting to try that as well. Observe the skin on the face, the forehead, temple region. See it's not puffing. Keep the eyelids closed and deep. Take any easy breaths, recovery breaths. I'll let you do 2 more cycles here. And then you want to finish off where you're even on both sides. And when you're finished, don't be in a hurry. Take a few normal breaths before you lift your head up. And then keep your eyes closed, but then eventually take your head upright and just observe. Slowly start to open your eyes, take your time, and you'll lie down for flat shavasana. So flat shavasana is recommended after a seated pranayama particularly. And again, you can take that bolster under your knees. You can have your legs into the seat of the chair if your back is a little bit tweaky. You can have your bolster blankets on top of you. If you want some softness for the back of the head, take that. Take anything you need. You can shut your lights out. You can cover yourself up. For some students, if they find their karmendriya, the organs of action, aren't settling down, you can actually do your shavasana with your feet up against the wall so that there's just this little pressure and it's very grounding. So just as an FYI, if you feel like your legs continue to kind of move or your feet, toes move, and also sometimes we put blankets over the palms of the hands if, again, there's a sense of jumpiness, so that you can really settle down in your shavasana. A shavasana after pranayama is where we learn to absorb the prana. So I think I said last week about like taking a supplement or a nutrient. Your body has to be able to absorb that. So the right conditions have to exist for the absorption to occur. So take some time to make the karmendriyan, the organs of action, still, soft, quiet, steady. I mentioned last week that Iyengar says the shavasana that comes after pranayama has the aim to go deeper. It's an involution or involutionary process. And he says this is the closest one can get to teaching meditation. He felt that meditation couldn't be taught, but that the experience of shavasana after pranayama brings the student as close to a guided meditation or teaching meditation. Stillness of the arms and legs create a stillness within. Stillness of the tongue stops that inner talk. Deep stillness allows for the absorption of the prana. The absorption of the prana into the nervous system and into the deeper aspects of your being. Creating that profound stillness in shavasana allows for the energy to get completely absorbed throughout the body. As you enter into this silence of the deeper aspects or layers of koshas of yourself. That quote I read earlier talked about balance and how we shouldn't have to, always strive or work to find balance in our lives, So when we go into these deeper layers, koshas of ourselves, beyond the physical, physiological, mental, and in layer of intelligence, towards the Anandamaya kosha, that's that layer of balance or equilibrium or bliss that is always there. So we've come to the end of the timing of the class now, but if you want to stay for longer in your Shavasana, then please feel free. If you are starting to feel like your attention and your awareness is coming up towards the surface, then you can make your way up into a seated position, but go slowly with the head coming up last. Namaste. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Sometimes I find after pranayama in the evening, I sleep really well. So maybe just take a note of that. And we'll see you next week. Take care.